People often say that your best man should stand by you. Mine pierced it through, twisting the knife for added safety. Aaron's insistence on managing the wedding party's hotel reservations should have alerted me to a problem. Dude, you already have too much on your plate. With the same effortless smile that had been his signature since college. He said, let me handle it. He was always there to provide assistance. Always present. Until last night, when I discovered the precise reason. It was always there. It began during the after-party for the rehearsal dinner. People were celebrating what should have been the most joyous weekend of my life. Clinking glasses. And laughing. However, I saw that someone, or rather, something, was absent. Where is Emma? I looked around the packed rooftop bar and inquired. Lily, one of her bridesmaids, shrugged and remarked, I believe she mentioned that she needed some air. Perhaps pre-wedding jitters? Jitters. Correct. As I took out my phone, I reminded myself of that. Emma once texted me, expressing her feeling of overwhelm and the need for space. I adore you. I attempted to contact. The call went straight to voicemail. At that point, I also realized Aaron was no longer there. Someone joked, probably went to grab more drinks. But I felt sick to my stomach. There was a problem. There was no sign of his car outside. I'm not sure why, but I opened Instagram, possibly to divert my attention or to DM Emma. I was surprised to see a preview of a narrative that she must have accidentally shared. A hotel room number in the background, room 847, was all I could see before it vanished. Even though it was only up for a brief moment. Not like ours. As I entered the elevator, my heart pounded. It might have been nothing. Perhaps she had truly needed room. Aaron might have simply been somewhere else. Nevertheless, I gripped the extra keycard Aaron had given me earlier with tight fingers, just in case. Man, you never know. He had smiled. Except for the gentle buzz of the ice machine. The 8th floor corridor was unnaturally quiet. I came to a halt outside of room 847. Wiped the card. The lock gave a green beep. Without a sound, the door opened. I didn't shout, didn't yell. Nobody hurled anything. The scene in front of me burnt itself into my memory as I stood there with my phone in hand. They were not even aware that I had entered. Aaron smirked as he gazed up to the rustle of the blankets. It was the smirk that chilled my blood. He reached for his phone and remarked nonchalantly, she was never yours to begin with. Do you want to view the messages? For what duration has this been occurring? How does she approach me whenever you're too preoccupied with work? Please, Daniel. Emma gripped the covers tightly to her chest. Tears welling up in her eyes. I can clarify. Save it. I interrupted her in a calm voice. Preserve the ring. It's phony nonetheless. It wasn't. The lie was worth it. Though, as she watched her face collapse. With that fucking grin still on his face. Aaron laughed. She needs more because of this. Someone who could. Aaron, you know what's funny? I cut him off before he could say anything further. You haven't even realized that you lost your job yet. The grin faltered. The same firm employed us. But we worked in different departments and in the same building. Aaron may have believed he was untouchable. But I knew otherwise. I received copies of every inappropriate email he sent from his work account. He has always claimed credit for the efforts of others. He had pleaded for every favor to make up for his errors. He sneered, you're bluffing, but his tone had lost some of its assurance. I grinned, but it was the type of smile you give when you know you have all the cards. Do you recall the project you oversaw the previous quarter? Is this the same project for which you received a bonus? I cocked my head a little. Elsie saved her receipts. Every individual matters. She simply waited for the ideal opportunity. Aaron's face went white. Before she changed departments a few months ago, Elsie had been his direct report. Astute, meticulous. It was also obvious that she had been observing him more intently than he had thought. I held up my phone and said, oh, and one more thing. I just gave Odette a few screenshots. Your fiancé, you know, the person you are set to wed next month? Aaron snapped his head back as if I had given him a slap. What? A while back, she contacted me on Facebook. As it happens, she was already suspicious. My proof? It was the last push she required. Emma's eyes darted to Aaron, and the room's atmosphere grew heavier. Are you engaged? I left before listening to the rest. I had received what I required. I made a call to my parents on the way down to the lobby. We're getting married, I said plainly. I'll elaborate later. Have faith in me. After that, I hopped in my car and headed to the 24-hour diner where I used to study while I was in college. Placed a coffee order. I opened my laptop. I needed to write emails. It was going to be a very interesting morning for our. Without the alcohol, the following morning was like a hangover. After all I had witnessed, done, and still intended to do. Sleep had not been easy. However, fatigue was the least of my concerns as I mixed my coffee in the dark cafe light. I looked through my email. The concise and direct email to HR contained ample evidence to severely damage Aaron's career. PDFs of all the offensive messages he had written to female coworkers. Evidence that he had fabricated reports. And screenshots of him disparaging clients in internal chats were also attached. The kind of things that led to your blacklisting in addition to your termination. I looked at HR's automated responses timestamp. 7:06 a.m. as soon as they arrived at work. They would notice it. I looked at my phone as I sipped my coffee. Emma has not sent any new messages. I didn't anticipate any. I choose to open Messenger instead. It was Odette's final response from the previous evening. Odette. I appreciate you telling me. I was always aware that something wasn't right. I've had enough of him. Excellent. Another thread is coming loose. The sky outside had changed from dark gray to pastel blue by the time I finished my coffee. It's time to go home. Or at least to the location that seemed like home before it turned into a place where I was reminded of someone I couldn't trust. The quiet was thicker than usual when I entered the front door. Emma's shoes were still in the same spot at the doorway. As if nothing had changed. However, everything had. She was sitting on the edge of the couch in the living room, holding her phone closely when I spotted her. As soon as I walked in, she glanced up, her eyes puffy and red-rimmed from crying. She rose up and said, "Daniel, please," her voice cracked. "Can we have a conversation?" Deliberately calm, I placed my keys on the table. "Speak," I repeated. "Want to talk now?" I made a mistake. She blurted out the words quickly. I have no idea what I was thinking. It simply happened. However, I adore you. Don't. I didn't mean for my voice to sound that sharp. Avoid saying that. However, I do. Her hands balled into fists and pressed them to her chest. Last night, God, I have no idea why The air between us was tense with unspoken words as I moved closer. Saying, "You knew exactly what you were doing. This wasn't a drunken mishap. This was not an isolated moment of poor judgment. For how long have you been seeing him behind my back?" She shook her head angrily as tears ran down her cheeks. "That wasn't the case. I never intended to cause you any harm. But you did." I lowered my voice. "Steadier. What's worse? With him, you succeeded. My best friend. The person I had the most faith in. Please, Daniel." She reached for my hand. But I drew away before she could make contact. "You must go." Her breath caught. What? This?" I made a hazy gesture toward the area surrounding us and everything we had constructed together. "We have completed this task. Gather your belongings and leave." "However, where should I? I don't have that problem." Stunned into quiet, she blinked. I thought she might argue for a second. Beg, make a plea. But then, as though the consequences of her decisions had finally caught up with her, her shoulders slumped in defeat. She turned and vanished down the hallway into the bedroom without saying anything else. Shortly after, there was a mild reverberation throughout the house as drawers opened and closed. As the life we had created together was being disassembled piece by piece. I stood still in the living room and listened. By midday, she had left. Her perfume's subtle aroma persisted in the air, serving as a melancholy reminder of what might have been, with a hollow ache in my chest and tire tracks on the asphalt. I watched from the window as her automobile vanished down the street. But there was no time to reflect on the loss. I wasn't ready to let go just yet. I still had work to do. I picked up my laptop, sat down on the couch, and launched a new tab. Aaron's business profile is the first place to look. Aaron's business is currently thriving. However, that would soon alter. I then looked at LinkedIn. Aaron's profile was still visible to the public, with a list of made-up accomplishments beneath his beaming visage. Just in case, I took screenshots of everything. I then looked up Odette's profile. I discovered some commonalities, but everything was private, enough to confirm that her statement that she was done with Aaron was true. At last, I opened an email account on a burner. I started sending important pieces of proof, one by one, to recruiters, industry contacts, and professional networks. These individuals were crucial to Aaron's success. Those who could guarantee Aaron's career never bounced back. My hands were shaking from exhilaration and fatigue by the time I finished. However, the tension in my chest had somewhat relaxed. This was just the start. I had lost everything to Aaron. It was my time now. Through half-closed blinds, the pale light of morning gently filtered in. With my hands clasped around a cold coffee mug, I sat at the kitchen table and gazed at the phone that was lying in front of me. HR hasn't notified me yet, but I knew it would happen eventually. I had ensured that Aaron's career would not only suffer a setback but would completely collapse. What about Emma? The acute, lingering pain of her treachery continued to gnaw at the corners of my consciousness even after her departure. Retaliation cannot undo that, however. It would undoubtedly facilitate the process of moving on. A buzz broke the silence. I looked down at the screen. Jake, check out the company's Slack. Dude. Before I had finished reading the message, I was already on the move. Open laptop, fingers tapping quickly. Half of the new messages that flooded Slack were in the #announcement dashboard channel. At the top, pinned, company notice. As of right now, Aaron Caldwell is no longer working for the company. Violations of our professional code of behavior are not tolerated. We value everyone's collaboration throughout this change. Human Resources Department. Reactions erupted in the chat below. Nina. What the devil did? Mark. I've heard that he sent offensive messages. Amy. Goodbye. He was a jerk. Brian. Hold on. Is this related to his remarks regarding the Mitchell account? Tasha. Whoa. HR made quick progress. The slightest glimmer of satisfaction rose in my chest as I leaned back. A victory. However, I wasn't finished yet. By midday, rumors of Aaron's dismissal had begun to circulate outside the office. His name appeared on LinkedIn groups and industry forums, linked to accusations of professional dishonesty and wrongdoing. Regardless of how explicit or ambiguous the posts were, they inflicted damage. In real time, his reputation was falling apart. To check my burner email, I changed tabs. What I already knew, that Aaron had very little chance of obtaining another employment in this field, was reinforced by fresh responses from recruiters and industry connections. The sound of a text message distracted me. I took a look at my phone. Unknown number. This is what you did. I am certain it was you. My pulse was racing as I gazed at the television. Me. Who is this? The response was practically immediate. Unknown number. Don't act foolish. You ruined my life. You'll regret this, I promise. A gradual grin pulled from my mouth's corner. Aaron. Aaron was the one, of course. Me. You were alone when you did that. I simply ensured that everyone was aware of the reality. As though he was having trouble finding the perfect words. The next communication took longer to arrive. Aaron. It's not over yet. After a moment of staring at the screen, I locked the phone and put it away. Give him time to stew. Now his warnings were in vain. The days that followed went so quickly. Without Emma, the home felt more empty. But I enjoyed the quiet. It allowed me time to reflect and make plans for the future. Because even though I had caused Aaron professional harm, I still had feelings for him. He had to experience what I had. The empty anguish of losing all he held dear. The sting of betrayal. And the breakdown of trust. And I was fully aware of how to accomplish that. After some research, I was able to locate the information I required, including Odette's internet presence, Aaron's social media accounts, and even some familial ties. After spending hours assembling the pieces of his life, I discovered that his parents were the weakest connection. Their home location and phone number came up in a short search. It wasn't difficult. Digital breadcrumbs are left by people everywhere, and I knew precisely where to look. I sat at my desk that night, holding my burner phone, and I stared at the number I had discovered. Despite the overwhelming want to dial it immediately, I made myself wait. It was all about timing. I typed out a brief but devastatingly clear statement instead. Aaron Caldwell, your kid, is not who you believe him to be. Inquire about Emma and the events of the wedding night. After a brief moment of hesitation, I clicked send. Silence for a beat, then another. In my hand, the phone began to vibrate. Another message appeared. From Aaron this time. Aaron. How could you possibly have done that? With a slight throb of excitement pulsing through my veins, I reclined in my chair. Me. Just making things more equal. How is the reunion with relatives going? With a litany of profanities and threats. He responded quickly and angrily, exacerbating the fire within me. As his world began to crumble, I read each word with a growing sense of delight. I drank a beer and gazed out at the dark street while sitting on the porch later that evening. There was a slight smell of fall leaves in the crisp air. The silence was broken by a dog barking somewhere in the distance. I ought to have felt triumphant. Aaron had lost everything to me, including his relationship, profession, and even the trust of his family. What about Emma? She and every lie she had ever told were permanently removed from my life. Why, therefore, did the emptiness persist? The sharpness of the beer pricked my tongue as I took another sip. Perhaps retaliation wasn't the remedy I had hoped for. Perhaps some wounds are too deep to heal completely. Aaron would always remember what I had done to him. Though, I wouldn't either. The consequences struck more quickly than I anticipated. Aaron's social media profiles were completely black by morning. His LinkedIn profile disappeared, as though he were attempting to remove all online traces of himself. Even his previous college accounts vanished. However, the damage was already irreparable. The rumblings in the industry had become a roar, and no amount of digital housekeeping could stop it. But I knew Aaron well enough to anticipate reprisals. His final words, "This isn't over," rang in my head like a warning from afar. I wasn't concerned, though. I was in control, and I had no intention of letting him reverse the situation. The days that followed were uneventful. With Aaron gone, work was more relaxed. No more gossip whispered behind my back. No more sidelong stares. Even Jake appeared more relaxed, even though he hadn't inquired about the entire details of my actions. He might not have wanted to know. The first indication of Aaron's next course of action then came late one evening. My phone rang with a new notification while I was in my home office reviewing some late-night emails. An email from an unknown address. Subject: "You believed that this was the end of it?" After a moment of hesitation, I clicked it open. "You believe you've triumphed. However, you have simply begun an unwinnable conflict. I am aware of your residence. I am fully aware of you. You will not get away with ruining both my life and my job. Stay vigilant while you sleep." My pulse accelerated as I gazed at the screen. Instead of being alarmed by the threat, I felt a slow, icy resolve settle in my chest. I would offer Aaron a war if he desired one. I immediately used the email header to trace the IP address. It didn't take long to narrow down the location because I had learned a few methods from my years of working in IT. That was a wise choice, not Aaron's flat. He had instead made use of a downtown coffee shop's public Wi-Fi network. Careless. In a desperate situation. Excellent. As I contemplated my next course of action, I sat back in my chair and drummed my fingers against the surface. I would confront Aaron directly if he attempted to turn this into a personal conflict. But first I needed more power. Something that would make him give up for good. I remained quiet for the following few days while I awaited Aaron's next move. It took very little time. The following assault was physically closer to home. When I came home from work one evening, my mailbox was overflowing with anonymous letters, many of which contained horrible charges. Some ridiculed my persona, while others hinted at fabricated scandals that could potentially damage my reputation if they became public. Each letter had a different handwriting style, but the message was always the same: "You will pay for your actions." Without hesitation, I incinerated them all. Aaron was now struggling to stay afloat and attempting to make decisions in the darkness. However, I wasn't going to give him the advantage. Jake provided me with the necessary breakthrough. One evening after work, he said, "Hey, man," as we went out for drinks. "Have you heard about Aaron? Rumor has it that he is currently staying at his parents' house. They must be unhappy about the whole thing. You're aware." I arched an eyebrow. "Are you certain about that?" Jake gave a nod. "Indeed. Saw a post from a former friend. Aaron's father apparently ejected him following your brief message. I suppose the news didn't sit well with them. Aaron was therefore back where he had been before, desperate, jobless, and disowned. It makes sense why he was snapping. But everything changed when I found out where he was. I now have the power I required to put a definitive end to this." I went by Aaron's parents' house that evening. It was a little two-story house nestled in a peaceful suburban area. A dim illumination flashed from a window upstairs, but there were no lights on downstairs. I took out my phone and parked a few homes down, out of sight. He would be broken by one last message. Me. How are things at home? It must be difficult to explain why you are such a letdown. A minute went by. Then another. Aaron. Give me some space. Have you not gone far enough? With my fingers moving quickly across the screen. I grinned. Me. Not until you realize what you've stolen. The night you slept with Emma. You ruined my future. This is merely retaliation. He responded almost immediately this time. Aaron. I didn't intend for that to occur. It was an error. She was grieving over you. I was intoxicated, and it just occurred. Every day I regret it. The familiar pang of betrayal flared hot in my chest as I tightened my jaw. But I made myself pay attention. Me. Your actions are not altered by regret. You're paying the price now. But there's just one way out if you want this to stop. Before typing the last blow, I took a moment to allow the tension to grow. Me. I'd like to confess. Public. On social media. I'll make sure that everyone in your life is aware of the truth unless you confess what you did. The seconds passed slowly, like slow heartbeats, and the silence lasted for a long time. Finally, his response showed up. Aaron. You're a crazy person. I put the phone in my pocket, locked it, and grinned. Let him believe I was insane. People were unpredictable when they were desperate. And I was depending on that. Everything fell apart the following day. But not in the manner I had anticipated. Jake was the first to call. Dude, he remarked in a panicked voice. Aaron is in the medical facility. I went cold. What? Indeed. Last night, his mother discovered him overdosing on something. They just made it to the emergency room in time. Shock came suddenly and sharply through me. I tightened my hold on the phone. Is he? Jake declared. He's alive. However, it's all a matter of degree. What the devil did you do, man? As Jake's comments replayed in my mind, I stood in the center of my living room, my heart thumping against my ribs. How on earth did you accomplish that? Aaron could not have delivered a more powerful blow than the guilt. I was unable to eat or sleep for days. A weight I couldn't shed had replaced the sweet taste of victory. I had been so consumed by seeking revenge that I had failed to recognize the harm I was doing to Aaron and to myself. By the time I mustered the courage to visit the hospital, they had transferred Aaron to a private recovery room. For what seemed like an eternity, I stood outside the door while the faint beep of medical monitors reverberated weakly across the corridor. I went inside at last. With his eyes closed and his breathing regular but shallow, Aaron lay motionless and pale against the white blankets. His mother sat next to him. Anguish and tiredness imprinted on her face. Something changed in her eyes when she looked up and recognized me. Grief, rage, and recognition were all mixed together. Her voice was rough with fury as she said, "You did this. What transpired between you two is unknown to me. But, this is what you did." I started to reply, but my words would not come. Since she was correct, the shame gripped me tightly. I kept thinking about Aaron lying in that bed even after I left the hospital. Every time I closed my eyes, the words of his mother replayed in my mind. You did this. She was correct. The situation had escalated beyond reasonable limits. A search for justice has devolved into something more sinister. I had lost interest in consequences somewhere along the line, until they were unavoidable. The question I was unable to answer, though, was what tormented me more than the guilt. Had I turned into the antagonist in my own tale? The days went by quickly. My heart wasn't in it. But I went through the motions at work. Jake was even aware of the shift. Dude, you haven't been around recently. Are you alright? One afternoon as we were getting coffee, he asked, with everything bearing down on my chest. I paused. I'm not sure, I said. I believed that retaliation would cheer me up. Now, though, I simply feel empty. After examining me for a while, Jake slowly nodded. Indeed, the problem with retaliation is that it never actually provides the desired outcome. Long after we split ways, his comments continued to resonate with me. Perhaps closure had never been the goal of revenge. Perhaps I had been pursuing an unattainable goal. I ended up back at the hospital a week later. I didn't pause outside Aaron's door this time. With my heart pounding, I entered and faced the repercussions of my behavior. Aaron was conscious, even though his eyes were shaded by black circles and his skin was still pale. He recognized me. Why are you in this place? Even though his voice was raspy, it was clear that he was bitter. I took a deep breath. I came to speak, too. I apologize. Aaron squinted his eyes. Sorry disbelief permeated his tone as he repeated himself. After all of your actions? I forced myself to look him in the eye and said, I know I went too far. I wanted you to know how hurt I was by your betrayal. However, I never desired. I pointed to the hospital room and the devices that were keeping him steady. I never intended to put you in danger. Aaron's sneer was devoid of any genuine emotion. Yes, all right. Mission successfully completed. Between us, there was silence, thick with unsaid words. Aaron finally spoke again, but this time he spoke more quietly. I made a mistake, didn't I? I am aware of that. You don't have to remind me. And neither does anybody else. However, you received more than just retribution. You destroyed every aspect of my life. My reputation, my career, my family. His eyes gleamed as he swallowed hard. Was it worthwhile? I started to respond, but I was unable to do so. Since the reality was, I had no idea. I made an effort to put my life back together in the weeks that followed. But despite my best efforts, the consequences of my actions continued to weigh heavily on me. Aaron would finally get well, but our relationship would never be the same. A moment of treachery and the ensuing consequences made us strangers. Two individuals who would always be connected. I didn't see Emma again after that. When I last heard from her, she had relocated to a different city, distant from the devastation we had left behind. And me? Retaliation may provide momentary satisfaction, but it has a cost. As I discovered the hard way, I will bear the cost of this for the rest of my life. Perhaps a narrative like ours has no winners in the end, just those who survived.